And we are live with today's SY0-701 Security Plus Study Group. We are in the very last minutes of setting up. This is our pre-show. Let's pop out the chat. Now I can see the chat room. Hi, chat room. We've got the stream health here, so I can keep an eye on that. We're looking at our streaming numbers here, which look very good. So far, so good. It is a very busy day. I always seem to schedule these around some type of tropical disturbance. And today is no difference. Today we are ready for tropical storm force winds to come to the area. So that's where I am right now, is dealing with making sure that I don't have anything outside that can blow away. That's the important part. So we're in good shape. So far, though, internet is good. It's actually quite nice outside right now. We've got a bit of time before the storm gets here. So we're just waiting for the rain at this point. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Hey, chat room. How's everybody doing? I guess I should put up the map, right? We're about where you are joining us from. We'll open that poll. There we go. And we'll make it so that you can put your virtual pin into this. Well, that's not going to work. There we go. That's a better look. If you hit the right buttons, that works a lot better. We have all new Security Plus questions for you once we get started. This is not the live show yet. We're not there. This is the pre-show. So we're getting there. The top of the hour is where the actual show begins. But folks are checking in from all over. We got folks here from the UK, from Washington, D.C., from Tennessee, from Connecticut, from New Jersey, from Puerto Rico. We got Romania, New York City. We got Poland. We got folks checking in from everywhere. So where's the Canadians at? There's Jacksonville. Hey, Floridians, fellow Floridians that are in the tropical storm / hurricane watch. Hopefully you're in good place. You're in a good place. Well, Jacksonville, you are in a good place. You're far enough away. It's still going to be windy. It's still going to be rainy, but at least it'll be far enough away. Thanks for being here, Tejas. We got Montreal and Ontario. So glad to see the Canadians checking in. I will absolutely let Mrs. Professor Messer know. We have Ghana, Nigeria, and Indiana, and Lebanon, and Singapore. More Jacksonville. We got folks all over. Thank you for being here, by the way. Thank you for joining us on our Security Plus. I, of course, have all new questions for you. This will be posted on the channel. These live streams are automatically posted to the Security Plus playlist. There's a user group or a study group playlist, and then also the main channel of the site at professormesser.com/YouTube. As soon as we're done here, I hit the stop button, and then it automatically adds it. So I don't even have to do anything, which is my favorite kind of work. Is I push a button and magically things happen behind the scenes. So that works well. Professor, I can't find myself in your Discord server. I'm not sure what that means, but you can always join our Discord at professormesser.com/Discord. So it's always available. It's always there. Let's go ahead and pause the video because that makes me a little crazy. We got about 6 minutes before we get started. There it goes. Let me do a last check. Video looks good. These are my video inputs. These 4 that are in the middle of that screen are the important ones. There's me. There's the bird cam, which is what you're seeing right now. There is the screen in front of me that is reflected in that third panel. And then the 4th one is what's on this laptop right here. So I usually will switch between one or more of those. And then I have 4 more cameras I don't even use that you don't even see. Because how many more angles of me do you really need? We need one from here. We need one from this side. We need one from above. We do not. We don't need any of those. Let's check on me. Am I looking good so far? I'm looking as good as I can possibly look. We'll go with that. We'll go with that's as good as it gets right there. So it's not going to get any better than that. That's the way it goes. Let's plug in our phone so that we are fully charged when the storm hits. I don't know if I'll be losing any power or not where I am, but that's certainly a possibility as this storm comes through. It's a big one. It's a big one. Please turn on subtitles. Well, this is a live event, And real-time closed captioning is not available on a live event. I mean, it is if I paid someone to do it, but that would cost thousands of dollars. So once this is done, though, and it is on the YouTube channel, YouTube will go back through it and use their magic to automatically add machine-generated closed captions. So that will be on at that time. But unfortunately, I don't have a way to provide real-time subtitles. I'm so sorry. Real-time closed captioning. But you can follow along on the screen. A lot of the things we're going to do are on the screen, so that helps too. 4 minutes to go. 4 minutes, Mr. Sinatra. We're going to get things going. Let's do one last check here. Everything looks all right. We've got these. This is here. That looks good. These look fine over here. Lights are working. Video is looking good. A little bit of a little bumpy there in the graph. Don't often see it move up to 2%, but there it is. There's a lot of video. I send all this video stream directly to YouTube, and then YouTube sends it to you. So as long as I can get it to YouTube, I'm not worried about the other parts of this. I just want it to all work for you. But we'll see how that goes too. We got another couple minutes before we get started. Thanks for joining us, everyone. Get comfortable. Grab a beverage. Make yourself comfortable. Get a good place to sit. Hang out. This will be good. Hopefully you'll like these questions we have for today. I like that we're in the 701 exclusively now. We obviously retired the 601 earlier in the summer. And so there it is. If you're running OBS, there's a real-time subtitle plugin. Well, I'm not running OBS, so there's not a plugin for me. OBS has its own challenges. That would be the one good thing OBS can do, assuming real-time subtitles sounds sketchy. It does not sound like that's something that would work very well. Certainly not with the topics we cover. OBS has its own problems, though. So you would get real-time closed captioning, but then you'd have to deal with all the idiosyncrasies of OBS, of which there are many, because I used to use OBS. I used to be an OBS user. I would have a big machine in the back. It would be my OBS machine. And of course, it was running Windows, and it had video drivers, and these things would automatically update and then break the entire system. So I'd walk in for a live stream, I'd power it on, and none of it would work. And I'd have to spend an hour troubleshooting what the update changed in OBS. It was a mess. This, I turn it on and it works. That's it. That's what I was looking for. So OBS, though, does have its advantages. It is quite a powerful little program. And when you get it running the way you like, it's actually quite nice. I enjoyed using it when I did. But there's just too much involved in the management and maintenance of it for me to be happy with using it over a long term. So I threw it out and got something that was a little more purpose-built, which is this appliance from Blackmagic Design, which is their 4K streaming box. Ironically, it's the 4K streaming box that I do not stream at 4K. I stream it at 1080p. Now, I do that because the interaction on YouTube, you see it about 10 seconds after I say it. So that's what that's about. Okay. So let's now kind of focus on getting things going here. I think I got about less than a minute to go. We've got that screen is in its right place. That's in the right place. These are running. Recordings are going down here. You can't even see the Cylons down here very well anymore, can you? There they are. They're running there. We'll make sure that things get going. And I think we can probably get this ready. There's the notice saying the rain's starting up. How about that? Let's find our keynote. Oh, and look, there's an update. Just what you want to see when you're ready to start a live stream. Let's continue and hope for the best. We'll hit the button. Do we get a green light? We do. I'm sure it'll be fine. What's the worst thing that can happen? It's time for a live stream, everybody. Let's get this thing started. Here we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the September 2024 Professor Messer SY0-701 Security Plus Study Group. This is the study group where I ask you questions that come directly from the CompTIA exam objectives, and you are then going to put together a list of things that perhaps can help you answer some of these. We'll have to figure out, did you get it right? Did you get it wrong? We'll go through the whole process here. The way that you can join us and answer these questions if you are here live is to simply visit this page right here, professormesser.com/QA. And this will take you to a question. I guess I should put the question up on the screen so that we can see it. Go to professormesser.com/QA and you'll see a message that says, when power is removed from an inline IPS, all network traffic stops. Which of the following would describe this functionality? And one of the things, of course, the standing rules we have is please no answers in the chat room, please no hints in the chat room. The possible answers on this one are high availability, parallel processing, load balancing, cold site, or fail closed. Number of different topics there, all of them topics from the CompTIA exam objectives. Hopefully, it's some that you recognize. High availability, parallel processing, load balancing, cold site, and fail closed. This is a question from a previous study group that we do first to see if you're able to remember how to get in and use this front end. So make sure that it works, more importantly. Here is the link to go to that front end. Go to professormesser.com/QA to answer that question. And we will come back to that question in just a bit. Well, thank you for joining us. This is our Security Plus study group. We do a number of study groups throughout the month. We do 2A Plus study groups. We do a Network Plus study group. This is our last study group of the month. Now, of course, we're not here doing a live stream. You can, of course, go to our Twitter at professormesser.com/Twitter. I guess it's now X. Go to our X, whatever that means. You also have this weekly pop quiz question that I post there, so it might be a good thing to look at. I also post this question to our Instagram. You can find that at professormesser.com/Instagram with a pretty picture along with it. And of course, if you have not seen our Security Plus course, our entire course is available for you to watch for free. The entire thing, every minute of every video. Nothing's behind a paywall. You don't have to register to do anything. You simply go to professormesser.com/YouTube and you can watch the same course. It's all there. So another nice thing that the internet brings is the ability to share these videos, and I'm more than happy to bring these to you. And while you're there, it'd be great if you subscribed. If you like these videos, it'd be even great for you to give them a thumbs up as well. It sure helps us as we are working with our friends at YouTube to bring even more additions to this channel. And there's some interesting things happening. Hopefully by the end of the year, you'll see some things happening with the channel and some of the new features that YouTube is making available to us. Thanks to you. Thank you so much for doing that. Also let you know that we will no longer be talking about the SY0-601. For those of you that were tracking it, it retired in July of 2024. The current version of the exam is the SY0-701. This is one that was released in November of 2023. So it's been out almost a year at this point. It is estimated to retire somewhere around May of 2027. So this is the version that you should be studying for. There are people in other countries, non-English speaking countries, that can still take the 601 until the end of the year. So those videos are still available on my site. I have an archive link for those. But for those of us that are in English-speaking countries, we have all transitioned to the 701. So that's the difference. If you're seeing that on the website, you're wondering what the differences between those might be. Both of these are a single exam. So you take the 701. It's a 90-minute exam. You get a maximum of 90 questions. You could get fewer than 90 questions. And you need to earn a passing score of 750 on a scale from 100 to 900. It's an odd scale. It's an odd scoring system. We aren't exactly sure how they score things, but we do know that that entire process is one that hopefully you will eventually end up with a 750 or better to pass your exam. These are the things, if you are someone who is working on this exam, there's a little too many of me on the screen right there, isn't there? If you're working on this exam, then one of the things that you should focus on is the version of the exam that you're planning to take. And now that there's a single version, that certainly helps. It takes a lot of the questions out of the mix as to what you need to take. which I think is a good thing. We can now all focus on the SY0-701, and all of the questions that we do today will be specific to the SY0-701. We'll also let you know that some people would like to have offline versions of the videos. They would like to have audio versions of these videos so they can have them in their car while they're working out. Maybe you'd like our course notes or our practice exams. We'll talk about some of those later on in this study group. And if you'd like a bundle with all of this together, it's something that you can support our website by going to professormesser.com/701SB, or follow the links on the main menus of the website. This will be available on YouTube immediately afterwards for replay. I also create an audio-only podcast version so that you can listen to these study groups wherever you happen to be. And they're even on a number of different streaming services. So if you're on Spotify, you can simply search for Professor Messer on Spotify, and you'll see all of our study groups listed there. You can also join our podcast page. If you have a podcast listening program, the RSS feeds are there. You can go to professormesser.com/podcast to get your hands on those. Our A+ and Network Plus study groups are also on that page. Also let you know that somewhere in the next day or so, my marketing manager, Lori, will be watching this on the replay. Hi, Lori. Everybody say hi to Lori. She's watching the screen go by with the replay chat, and she's able to watch this probably at 2x speed, and she puts in all of these timestamps that you will find in the YouTube video description. This is one great benefit of having these. We go back years with this. These are not created automatically. It's not some type of magic. It is certainly not AI, and the way that you know that is that these are correct. These are legitimate links going to the correct place in the video. That's how you know they were done properly by a human. So if you are someone who's looking for a certain question, a certain answer, or maybe something in the after show, you'll find it in the YouTube video description. So something else that can help you find exactly what you are looking for. Now, of course, we're not doing these all the time. We're certainly spending time on other things. And when we are here and not running a live stream, you can find us on our Discord. We have plenty of people on the Discord. It's a fantastic community of thousands of people that have come together to one place to study for their A+, Network Plus, Security Plus, and other industry certifications. You can find this at professormesser.com/discord. A number of people will start up their own study room with streaming audio and streaming video. You could even start one yourself. Have a lot of people get together and study yourself for these exams. If you ever have a question about any of the topics that are in the exam objectives, there are so many people on this Discord that can help you answer those questions. Find out more about that. Join our Discord at professormesser.com/discord. Eventually, you will need to take this exam, and these exams are not free, unfortunately. There is a cost associated with taking these exams. The exams, though, you can get at a discounted rate. If you happen to live in the U.S., Canada, or a U.S. territory, you can purchase discounted vouchers from my website. These are the same vouchers you can get on the CompTIA website, but you aren't paying as much. I think that's a great benefit. And of course, I like to give you not just a discount, I like to give you a little bit more. So you also get, if you purchase the vouchers from my site, a copy of my Exam Hacks ebook, where I've documented a list of tips and tricks that I've accumulated through the years, not only in my study process, but during the exam itself. Some topics that might help you get a few extra points on your exam. These are things that might help you, and that's why I'm including them for free if you purchase the voucher at professormesser.com/vouchers. Now, this is also something you can't buy separately. You can only get this if you buy a voucher or you buy a success bundle. So this is something that's relatively exclusive to you, and I think it's something that can really help you as you're planning to take that final step into taking your exam. Find out more about that at professormesser.com/vouchers. Let's go to the question we asked earlier, which was, when power is removed from an inline IPS, all network traffic stops. Which of the following would describe this functionality? Would that be high availability, parallel processing, load balancing, cold site, or fail closed? And if I recall, you did very good on this earlier in the year. Let's see how we did on this one. We did very good on this this time as well. 71% of you say the answer is fail closed. We have 12% that say cold site, 7% say high availability, 4% say load balancing, and 3% said parallel processing. Fail closed means that when something fails, the entire system stops. So if you were to pull power out of an IPS that was sitting in line, and for example, an inline IPS is a very technical forwarding process. The data flows into one interface and it flows out another. We refer to these interfaces as the Gazinda interface and the Gazada interface. So that is the technical term for those things. So when you lose power, if that IPS is not set up to continue to pass traffic, all the traffic stops. So when it fails, you've now closed that connection. You've closed the door on that data. And if you had a bypass system in place, there are other things that you can get to go with an IPS or a firewall or any type of network appliance that would allow it to continue to run if you lose power. We refer to that as fail open. And in that scenario, you'd be using some type of optical bypass or copper-based bypass or some other system. So in that case, fail closed is the one we were looking for. Cold site refers to a disaster recovery location where there is no type of data, no hardware. It's just an empty room, effectively. So we refer to those as cold sites. They have nothing to do with inline IPSs or network traffic flows. High availability, this would actually be the opposite of high availability. You lose power to a system, everything stops. So that is low availability. That is no availability. So it would not be high availability. If you had two IPSs, what is the plural of IPSs? If you had two of those systems, you lost power to one, the other one could pick up the load. We refer to that as high availability. There's other high availability systems that you can put in there, but that's a very common way to implement HA, as we say in the industry, high availability. We also have load balancing. That's another way to provide a failover process. Many load balancers have a failover function built into them. Not only can they balance the load, they can recognize when a system is no longer available and then change how they're balancing the data. So load balancing is another way to allow systems to continue to run, which in this case did not happen, so it would not be a load balancer. And parallel processing is when you have multiple processes that are you have multiple systems that are processing threads on multiple systems simultaneously. It's one of those situations it's relatively unusual to find. Often parallel processing happens within the same system, but you can also have parallel processing occurring on multiple systems simultaneously, especially if it's a very complex process and you can use multiple CPUs to do that. One of those very interesting systems and ways to set that up. But in this case, we're talking about an IPS and traffic not flowing. Therefore, fail close would be the right answer, and 71% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. Well, as many of you know, when you sit down to take the Security Plus exam, the first set of questions you get on your exam are not multiple choice. So the question you see on your screen now, this is a multiple choice question. There's a question, and there are multiple options that you could choose from. If you didn't know the answer, with these 5 different options here, you at least had a 20% chance of getting the answer right just by guessing, just by a random number generator. And in fact, on your exam, you probably will only have 4 options to choose from, so your chances go up to 25%. But CompTIA doesn't want to make it that easy on you. They want to see if you really know your stuff. And for that reason, the first handful of questions that you get on your exam will not be multiple choice questions. They will be performance-based questions. Performance-based questions are questions that are anything but multiple choice. They could be fill in the blank. They could put you at a command prompt, although we don't have any command prompts on the Security Plus. It might be a matching question. It could be a drag and drop question. You might have to put things in a particular order. There are a lot of different ways to ask questions. But the one thing that will always be true for these performance-based questions is they all are based on the exam objectives. So as I like to say, it doesn't really matter how they ask the question. If you know all of the topics, they can ask it any way they'd like. You're going to be able to get it right. And the questions themselves are relatively straightforward. So I have for you, as I do every study group, the first new question of every study group is a new performance-based question. And I have a performance-based question for you. This one is on authentication factors. So I have for you on the screen 5 different descriptions, and I want you to tell me what authentication factor is being used. So you'll notice I'm not giving you the authentication factors. If this was an actual exam, this would probably be a drag and drop. So they would list out on the screen all of the options, or maybe it's a pull-down menu that lists out all of the normal authentication factors you need to know, and you would choose from that list. But that seemed to be a little easy. So instead, I made this one a fill in the blank, which is definitely more difficult because you need to know what these factors are. And in reality, just so you're aware, on your exam, you're probably not going to get a fill-in-the-blank question. CompTIA does not tend to ask fill-in-the-blank questions. So let's go through these. I want you to provide the appropriate authentication factor for each of these descriptions. The first one is a text message contains a random login code or pseudo-random login code. What authentication factor is that? A data center door requires fingerprint verification. What authentication factor is that one? All mobile devices require a PIN, P-I-N, to unlock. And we're not talking like a physical PIN. Sensitive data may only be accessed from inside the building. What authentication factor is that one? And then lastly, all corporate passwords are 8 characters or more in length. What authentication factor would be associated with that one? So there's a little bit of a challenge here. You first have to know what the factors are, and then you would have to put those factors in their appropriate description, match them up. And some authentication factors may be listed more than once in this list to make it even more difficult, because that's really what it is. I want you to be thinking about this one. Authentication factors is obviously part of the CompTIA exam objectives, and this is a absolutely legitimate way. Notice that they're not really asking you for a definition of the factor. They're giving you a practical example, and then you have to apply the appropriate technology to the practical example. So that's a really good example, by the way, of how CompTIA tends to ask questions on the exam. Very rarely is it, if ever, is it a trivia question? Is it a definition, or what does the abbreviation mean? That kind of thing. So they really want you to understand what's happening behind the scenes, what's happening underneath the surface. So hopefully this is something that you are familiar with. This is authentication factors. If you are not familiar with the authentication factors, we will go through a number of these in just a moment. You will absolutely be familiar with them before we are done today. So this is, again, for those listening in, provide the appropriate authentication factor for each description. And they are: a text message contains a random login code. A data center door requires fingerprint verification. All mobile devices require a PIN to unlock. Sensitive data may only be accessed from inside the building. And all corporate passwords are 8 characters or more in length. So let's go through each one of those, and let's see if we can match what we think the appropriate authentication factor would be for each one of those. So if you are logging into a site, you provide your username and your password. And one very common authentication factor that you often will see is these sites will text you a text message with a code. Now, we can absolutely argue over whether that would be a secure authentication factor, and there's a fine argument to be made regarding SMS or text messages and their usefulness in authentication factors. Let's just ignore that for the moment and decide what authentication factor would that be. And if we were to select one, that would be something you have. That is the authentication factor that we were looking for. How is a random login code something you have? Well, because it had to send a text message to that, and theoretically, you would be the only one who had your phone who would receive that text message. Now, there are obvious issues and challenges with this, which is why it's probably not a great way to authenticate with a factor these days. but it is at least some type of authentication that can be added to this. So because you have to have your phone to receive the text message, or you have to have your computer to receive the text message, you can, on many computers, receive text messages. Because of that, it is something you have. Otherwise, you would never receive the text, you would never have the code, and you would not be able to log in. Let's do another one. The next on our list is a data center door requires fingerprint verification. I used to have a data center door where I'd have to use my handprint as a type of verification, as a type of authentication factor. And because it's part of you, it's a biometric, it's a fingerprint, it's a something associated with facial recognition, it's a handprint, it is something you are. That is the key to this one, something you are. So if you're someone who is focusing on an authentication factor where it's part of you, then it is that biometric something you are is the factor that we were looking for. Next on our list is all mobile devices require a PIN, P-I-N, to unlock. Your mobile device might have a personal identification number associated with it, and you have to put in your personal identification number to unlock the mobile device. That is certainly an important consideration. And if that is something you are using, the only way that you would know what that PIN is that you've memorized it. It's in your brain somewhere. And when you memorize these things, you would be the only person who knows that. Because at this point, we really don't have a way to go into your brain to get that personal identification number out. So in that case, it would be something you know, something that only you know, something that is something in your brain. So you would absolutely know that one. Next on our list is sensitive data may only be accessed from inside the building. This is not an unusual security process, especially if your organization has very sensitive data that you deal with, and they want to be sure that the only people who can view that data are people that are inside the building. They may prevent and restrict access. You can't VPN. You can't go through the process of coming from another location. You can't be at a remote site. You can't be at home. You have to be inside the building. And because of that, it's more of a geographic authentication factor. So this would be somewhere you are. Sometimes we can determine this based on GPS. Maybe it's based on an IP address that has been assigned to your system. There are a number of different ways to determine where you are, but it can absolutely be a valuable authentication factor, especially if you want to add some additional security to your network. And lastly, all corporate passwords are 8 characters or more in length, as they should be. So if you're putting in a password, you have to type that password in, something you can work through. And of course, your passwords, they're not written down on a yellow sticky next to you, are they? Of course, they're not. So because of that, they are stored. Where would they be stored? They're stored in your brain. Passwords are something that is something you would know. And of course, that would be the factor that we would be looking at here. So those are the descriptions. A text message containing a random login code is something you have. That would be your phone. A data center door requires fingerprint verification. That's something you are, which would be biometrics. We have all mobile devices require a PIN to unlock. The PIN is something that you know that's in your brain. You've got sensitive data may only be accessed from inside the building. That would be somewhere you are. And then all corporate passwords are 8 characters or more in length. That would be something you know. So this is the set of objectives or the set of authentication factors that come from the objectives that you need to be aware of for this exam. These tend to change through different versions. So if you were studying for the 601, you may notice that the authentication factors that are listed in the exam objectives are slightly different on the 701. So I will absolutely tell you that you should always reference the exam objectives. And as we go through these topics today, make sure you have those available. We'll talk later on in the live stream on where you can get those objectives if you don't have those already. Let's now shift our gears back to a multiple choice question. Wouldn't that be nice? Our next question, something that might be a little bit easier for us to figure out, or at least give us a chance to guess at it. This question asks, a security researcher has discovered a malicious script hosted on a bank website. The script runs each time a customer logs in. Which of the following would best describe this attack type? Would this be vishing, supply chain attack, race condition, SQL injection, or watering hole attack? It's got to be one of those. And of course, if you think you know the answer, our standing rule, of course, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You instead want to follow the link that's on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. I have to see if you happen to know what that one is. See if this is something that you're familiar with. This should be an attack type that you know. It does come directly from the exam objectives, but then again, all of the answers come directly from the exam objectives. And because of that, if you're noticing an answer that you don't recognize or you're not exactly sure what that answer is referring to, you may want to go back to your exam objective. So make a note of that one so that you can go back and study that topic. That might be a topic that shows up on your actual exam. See if you know what this is. As always, of course, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. You want to follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. See if you happen to know what this one is. A lot of you already locked this one in. I'm thinking maybe we all know this one. Maybe this one's a gimme. We'll find out. The question again asks, a security researcher has discovered a malicious script hosted on a bank website. This script runs each time a customer logs in. Which of the following would best describe this attack type? Would it be vishing, supply chain attack, race condition, SQL injection, or watering hole attack? Let's see what you chose for this one. We'll stop the poll, and we see that we're a little bit torn on what we think this one might be. 45% of you, although not a majority, it certainly is the plurality of you chose watering hole attack. 43% of you chose SQL injection. I have 6% that say race condition, 4% for supply chain attack, and less than 1% said vishing for this. So the two that we were really trying to figure out what this would be watering hole attack or SQL injection. So this is the ones that we need to break down here. Now, if we look at the question, nothing in the question tends to point towards a database. Nothing in the question tends to point towards us going around any existing web pages or accessing a database directly. In fact, nothing in this question has anything to do with the database. In fact, there might not even be a database associated with this website because nothing in the question tends to point us there. And for that reason alone, I would probably say SQL injection is super unlikely since there's no mention of any data injection and there's no mention of a database. So I throw that one out right away. That leaves us with 45% of you that said watering hole attack. And if you're someone who is really looking at the way people access or get access to you, the watering hole attack tends to make a lot more sense. This is because the malicious script was on a third-party site. It was not at the attacker's website, and it was not at the victim's website. It was at a third-party website. It was at a bank website. And this bank website, every customer that logs in now is going through this bank website. The attacker could have just as easily gone into the parking lot and thrown USB keys out, and someone would pick up the USB key, take it in the office, and plug it into a system. That's another great way to get into a system, but people are a lot smarter about that these days. It's harder to attack directly on. So you can't trust that even the USB key attack is going to work anymore. So what if you send it in an email? Now, people are getting good about filtering out emails. Your emails may have all of the attachments may be already filtered out of that. That's not working either. So we need to have a way to get access to the victim. That's what the attackers are thinking. How can we get access to these victims? They're not clicking on attachments. They're not plugging in USB keys. What are we going to do? Well, one of the things you can do is now set up the attack somewhere else, somewhere that the user, the victim, is going to visit. So this might be, if you know that everyone in the building orders from a sandwich shop, maybe that's where the malicious script is going to go. Or in the case, this one that we have here, where it's on a bank website, this is actually ripped from the headlines, as they say, because this is an actual attack that occurred. The attackers went to a central bank website, waited for the users that they were hoping to find log in. Of course, their malicious script was running on everybody, but they were trying to find one particular victim. And eventually the victim logged in and they were able to grab the information they needed based on that malicious script. That is the definition of a watering hole attack. So if you are someone who answered watering hole attack, you got that one absolutely correct. And of course, we've already described why SQL injection would not be the right answer. Would not be a race condition. There are not multiple things happening at the same time that would cause a conflict between those multiple things happening simultaneously. In this case, someone's logging in and a script is running. There's no contention on either side of that. It's just something normally that will work there. The race condition, therefore, would not be applicable. Would also not be a supply chain attack because this is not part of a supply chain for the victim. This is someone logging into a third-party website, software as a service. They're on the bank website. So it's not part of a supply chain. It's more of a third-party service. And because of that, watering hole attack certainly applies. And vishing, of course, is a phishing attack done over voice. You've probably gotten these phone calls of people trying to scam you out of something because they call you on the phone and want to talk to you. It's so antiquated. But it must be working because they continue to do it. So vishing, although a very useful form of attack for the attackers, not something that's going to apply to someone running a script on a third-party website. The best description here is indeed watering hole attack, and 45% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. Let's do another one. I've got another question for you. This one asks, a company is configuring their systems for 802.1x. Which of the following would best describe this configuration? Would this be loop prevention, wireless encryption, server redundancy, authentication requirement, or file integrity monitoring? You have a number of options there. Of course, all of these directly from the exam objectives, but only one applies for this particular question. The question again asks, a company is configuring their systems for 802.1x. Which of the following would best describe this configuration? Is this loop prevention, wireless encryption, server redundancy, authentication requirement, or file integrity monitoring? If you think you know the answer, follow the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. It's got to be there somewhere. As always, of course, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to go to the link on your screen, professormesser.com, and lock in your answer. And for those of you that tend to put your answers in the chat room, only some of you are usually correct anyway. So it's probably best that we kept it to ourselves. professormesser.com/QA. This would be me putting in an answer. Oh, the answer is no, I got it wrong again. That's pretty much how I work every time to be able to make that happen. If you're ever in a situation where you're looking at this list, you're hopefully able to throw out some of these. So have a look at the things you know it could not be, and you can do a calculatus limitatus to that one. You can throw that one right out the window and maybe concentrate on what's left. So if you do get down to a guess, it should at least be an educated guess. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asks, a company is configuring their systems for 802.1x. Which of the following would best describe this configuration? Is this loop prevention, wireless encryption, server redundancy, authentication requirement, or file integrity monitoring? Let's see what you chose. We'll stop the poll and see if you answered. And in this case, again, we're a little torn. We've got 51% that say authentication requirement and 41% that say wireless encryption. And then everything else drops down to 3% for server redundancy, 3% for file integrity monitoring, and 0% for the poor loop prevention, which I thought would be at least one in that list because it is an 802.3 standard. But in this case, nobody bit on the 802.1x standard. 802.1x can best be described as network access control, or NAC, we often say in the industry. Network access control is one where we can limit someone's access to a network. They have to authenticate before they're even allowed in. Now, this is great for things like wireless networks, where nobody gets on the wireless network unless you're able to provide the right username and password. It's very common to see 802.1x being used in a corporate environment on the wireless network because of that. And then we also have the questions about things like plugging into an open port in a conference room. You know, I've been in lots of conference rooms. Part of my previous job would be going from site to site, seeing customers, visiting 3 or 4 customers a day, and we'd be invited into their offices and usually into a conference room. And they usually will drop us off, say, we'll get the folks in here. They'll be in about 10 minutes. Well, now I've got 10 minutes in this conference room as a IT security professional, and there's a lot of ports on the wall. There's a lot of jacks where you could plug in. Hopefully that organization was using 802.1x, because even if I took my system and plugged it into one of those interfaces, I wouldn't have access to the network because network access control, or 802.1x, was enabled on that particular switch. And it would first prompt me for a username and password, and only then would I be able to gain access. Now, of course, since I walked in from off the street, I don't have a username and password. Therefore, they can comfortably leave me in that conference room and not worry that I'm going to plug into their network, because they already have the security tools in place to prevent access to the network by goofballs like me on their network. So in this case, having 802.1x provide an authentication requirement was the answer that we were looking for. Authentication requirements are an important consideration for keeping out the bad guys or people like me in the conference room or the wireless network. 802.1x is not associated with wireless encryption. The 802.11 standards are associated with that. In this case, the X is not a placeholder. It's not a variable. That is the actual letter X. Very similar to the company formerly known as Twitter. It's an actual letter X. It's not a placeholder. It's not standing in for something else. 802.1x with a capital X is a standard name. The capitals are referencing an actual standard name, whereas the lowercase letters on an IEEE standard, like 802.11n, 802.11ax, those refer to changes to an existing standard, in that case 802.11. So there's a little bit of IEEE trivia for you anyway. Not something you necessarily need to know for the exam, but a little piece of little factoid that you can put into your brain for everything else we're doing. So 802.11 deals with wireless networks. 802.1x is not associated with wireless encryption. File integrity monitoring is a way to monitor a file, to watch files, or as we say here where I live, files that are on your system. And those files are usually not changing. And they're especially things like your operating system files, configuration files. Those are files that should not be modified at any time. So you can configure an application to watch those files. And if anything changes with those files, you can have the system tell you about it. It can send an alarm. It can send an alert. It can identify that something has been modified. This can be useful to catch someone who's trying to make a change to an important configuration file. And then you, of course, have server redundancy. Server redundancy, very good for maintaining uptime and availability, but 802.1x has nothing to do with server redundancy, anything to do with high availability. This is really more focused on network access control. And nobody chose loop prevention. I was hoping that the 802.3 standards for spanning tree protocol would ping someone's mind on that one. But in this case, nobody bit. 0% say loop prevention. That's what I was thinking about with spanning tree and the 802.1d. I guess it's 802.1d, isn't it? And there are later versions. I try not to memorize all of these because it's not necessary to know for the exam. And I feel like sometimes I'm throwing a lot of those standard names out, which is something we don't necessarily need to know for the exam anyway. So hopefully that gives you an idea of what the different options were for this one, and it helps you understand why authentication requirement was the right answer for someone who would be integrating 802.1x. That's the answer we were looking for, and 51% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well, as you've already seen, there are a lot of different topics on the Security Plus exam. Security Plus, probably more than A Plus or Network Plus, has just such a broad set of topics that you need to know to be able to pass this exam. So hopefully this is something that you are mindful of as you're going through. And if you're able to watch all of my videos, my Security Plus course has 121 videos and over 15 hours of information. That's a lot of information to have to write down. And of course, I highly recommend you take notes, but not everybody has time to go through all 121 videos. Then after you do that, your notes may not be exactly the ones that you would like. So I want to give you some additional options for notes. These would be my course notes. Here's a copy of the PDF version of my course notes. I'm just going to page through. You can see that these course notes are almost 100 pages in length, 96 pages, and they contain all of the text from my videos, all of the charts. There's the security controls chart in the upper right. Here are important graphics, like things like the CIA triad graphics or some of the infographics that I've created exclusively for this course. Maybe not exclusively. Some of these I do use on other courses, but these are graphics that I created so that you can see the process that occurs when someone is creating a digital signature or verifying a digital signature. That information is there and available in this PDF in these course notes. Not only do we have the digital version in that PDF, there's also physical versions of the course notes available. The physical version, it contains exactly the same information as the digital version. You can see it looks identical with the same information and the same infographics, full color. It is perfect bound, which means it's bound like a paperback book. Glossy color, we wouldn't do it any other way. This is high quality stuff, and it's something that can help you. You can carry this wherever you happen to go. This is something where you can reference wherever you happen to be. You don't need a computer or any type of mobile device to do it. But if you get the physical version of this physical edition, you get the digital edition for free. So while you're waiting for this to be delivered, you can, of course, download the digital edition immediately and start using that PDF. This might be something that can help you with your studies. It might be something that can give you just a little bit more to study with. If you'd like to know more about this, there's also some cost savings when you buy it in conjunction with my practice exams book. We'll talk about that later. Find out more at professormesser.com/701cn. It's also a great way to support what we do on the website. This is how we're able to keep this entire thing going, is thanks to your support. So thank you so much for that. Let's do some more questions. Next on our list is this question. It's a developer question. The development team has tested a new application in a lab containing an exact replica of the production VMs. Which of the following would describe this testing? Would this be static code analysis, input validation, sandboxing, secure cookies, or code signing? Got a few options there. A development team has tested a new application in a lab containing an exact replica of the production VMs. Which of the following would describe this testing? Is this static code analysis, input validation, sandboxing, secure cookies, or code signing? As always, of course, please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. Instead, you want to follow the link that's on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer. It's a great thing to step through and see if you know it. Those in the chat room that are saying if you got the digital version, you didn't know there was the physical book. If you want to upgrade to the physical book, you can just open a help desk ticket on your website, on the Professor Messer website. In your member area, there is a help desk there. And I will be informed, and I can send you an upgrade link so that we'll credit back what you've already spent on the digital version and apply it towards the physical. So you're not out any money. That's the good part. So make sure that you take advantage of that. I don't want you to have to purchase both of those. That would be unnecessary, especially since you get the digital for free when you purchase the physical version. But I'm more than happy to upgrade you. I've got an entire process for that. I should really put a link in your member area that if you have the digital version, that you could just click and upgrade to that. I'll work on that. Lori, she's watching the replay. Say, Lori, can you send me an email reminding me to put that link out there? This is great because now I don't have to write it down somewhere and then lose it in the meantime. So she's always good at sending those back to me. So it's almost like we're talking, but it's a very extended conversation between me and Lori. Hi, Lori. How you doing? How are things? How's the fam? How are things going? Lori is also in the state of Florida, so we're all sort of hunkered down for this hurricane to come through. It's going to be an interesting week. By the weekend, it'll be past us. We'll have to sort of recover at that point and figuring out the deal with what we're working through there. Let's see how you did with this one. The question again asks, a development team has tested a new application in a lab containing an exact replica of the production VMs. Which of the following would describe this testing? Is it static code analysis, input validation, sandboxing, secure cookies, or code signing? Let's see what you chose. We'll close the poll up, and the answers by far, yeah, it was a gimme. 91% of you say the answer is sandboxing. You developers creating your sandboxes, playing around in the sand. This is a very common way to test in a lab because you're testing with real software. You're testing with real data. In some cases, testing with real users. You bring them into the lab and have them go through it. Before you deploy this out into a production environment, you can test it the way they use it, and they can give you that feedback. But you have to have effectively an environment that mirrors the environment that you would be using in production. And this is perfect for a sandbox. That's what we would describe this as. Just as a sandbox would be a place where you can try different things and play around and create a castle and tear the castle down. You can do exactly the same thing in a lab since nobody's using this as a production system. The sandboxing often is not quite so free in what you're doing with it. Instead, is a very good example of sitting down and building a system that is exactly the same as what you're using in production, or as close as you can in any case, because that can really, really help you if you're working through that process. Sandboxing itself is commonly used during a development process. There's a lot of different ways to set this up, but with virtual machines, it's really simple because you can effectively take a copy of a production VM and move it into your development environment, and now you really are running the same code that they're running in production. A great way to set up your sandbox. 91% of you got that one absolutely right. You knew what the answer was there, and that was not very difficult for many of us. Let's see if we can now move to a question that might be a little more challenging to you. This next question asks, each time a company laptop is lost or stolen, the total loss is approximately $4,000. Which of the following would describe this value? Would that be SLE, EF, ALE, AV, or ARO? These exams are nothing if not acronyms. The question again asks, each time a company laptop is lost or stolen, the total loss is approximately $4,000. Which of the following would describe this value? Is this SLE, EF, ALE, AV, or ARO? I think we're running out of letters. We're using all of the letters at this point. If you think you know the answer, please answer with the link you see on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Please no answers in the chat room. Please no hints in the chat room. This is one where you do need to know the acronyms. Now, fortunately, most of these acronyms that you see on the screen are related to each other. They are related to each other. So I didn't make it too difficult. At least I kept them sort of in the family, so to speak, with some of these. So see if you know what the answer might be, or you could take a guess at what you think the answer might be and put that in at the link you see on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA to lock in your answer and see what these are. This is one. Let's see if you know this one. Let's see what you answered on this one. The question again asks, each time a company laptop is lost or stolen, the total loss is approximately $4,000. Which of the following would describe this value? Is this SLE, EF, ALE, AV, or ARO? We'll stop the poll, and 58% of you say the answer is SLE, which is the upgraded version of the Nissan. I think that's true. You have 18% that say the answer is ALE, 14% say AV, 6% single digit say ARO, and another low down single digit, way down there at 2%, EF is the answer that we were looking for. One of the things about risk assessments, and one of the important things that you're able to do with risk assessments, is to make a business decision on how much this costs. That is, for most people, when we're talking about making business decisions, it's based around a value. So those values are pretty important to know, and they will help you understand what the impact might be to your bottom line. And when you're a business, you want to minimize the amount of expenses that you have. And you, of course, want to be sure that you're able to maximize the profit that you have as well. So there needs to be a good balance there. There are ways to calculate what these risk values might be. One is to determine how often this might occur during a year. We refer to this as an annualized rate of occurrence. This is timely, isn't it, that we have on here, for example, how likely is it that a hurricane will hit? Well, if you're in Montana, there's probably not a very big likelihood that you're getting a hurricane. If you're in Florida this weekend, there's a 100% chance that you're going to get a hurricane this year, or at least one. But the real question is, how many of these are we going to get this year? You've probably seen at the beginning of the hurricane season, there's always a news story that says, the experts this year say that we estimate this many hurricanes are going to hit. Well, there's your annualized rate of occurrence. That's how many we believe will be hitting. It might be that number. It might be fewer. It might be greater. We're not sure, but it's an estimate of what we think it will be based on where we are. If you're in Florida, there may be more than one this year. I expect that's probably the case. We also have an asset value. How much does that particular asset cost the organization? We want to know the cost of the asset, the effect that it has. If we had to replace it, how much would that be? And then we have an exposure factor. This is where you would understand when you lose that asset, how much of it was lost. Did we lose everything? If we lost everything, then the exposure factor is a 1. If we lose half of it, it's 0.5. If we lose a quarter of it, it's 0.25. You get the idea for exposure factors. There are, of course, other things we need to know. So if we lose one of these laptops, for example, losing a laptop, the exposure factor is pretty much a 1, because you don't lose half of a laptop. They don't leave the monitor left over. They don't rip off the LCD display and leave that. They take the whole laptop. So we can assume if we're losing a laptop, the whole thing is going away. So we need to calculate how much a laptop, what's the value to replace that, multiply that times the exposure factor, and you have the number that is the single loss expectancy. That is how many, every time you lose a laptop, it's an SLE. That's your single loss expectancy. In fact, you'll notice 58% of you chose single loss expectancy, and that would be the value that we were looking for. That's exactly the one that was there. Now, it would not necessarily be the asset value, although technically you could argue that that would also apply in this very broad description of this particular question. But if you're working through these questions, I'd give you credit there. I think asset value would work in that scenario too. So if you answered SLE, I'll take that as correct. If you answered asset value in the context of this question, which apparently was a badly written question on my part, I could have been a little clearer about those. But I think there's a good argument to be made there, and I think I'll accept your argument. I'll say that one's right as well. We'll go with that one. I don't mind doing that on the fly here. If we have a number of laptops stolen during the year, we should be able to estimate based on things that happened last year. Last year, we lost 10 laptops. This year, we'll probably lose about the same. So now you've determined the annualized loss expectancy by taking 10 of those laptops. If each laptop is worth $4,000, that's $40,000 worth of an annualized loss expectancy. So those are just some of the values that you need to know when you are trying to calculate what the risk might be and the financial circumstances surrounding that risk. And now you can start to make some decisions. For example, you might have a company come to you that says, we're able to track and recover 50% of organizations' laptops that are stolen. Okay, we can take that and put that into our equation. If your service costs less than 50% of the loss that we're getting, maybe I use your service now. Maybe I'll come out ahead by using the service that this company is providing. So these numbers, these calculations that we're doing are not just a mathematical process. They're allowing us to make business decisions about the risk associated with these products and ways to mitigate that risk. At what point should you start spending money to help better protect the laptops, to help train people better, to have some type of software that can track them? These things all cost money. How do you know when to implement those? Well, you do that by looking at the quantitative risk assessment values, and that's why it's important for you to know what these abbreviations are. So in this case, the two that we were looking for was a single loss expectancy. I will also accept an asset value. And if you're someone who is watching this video for continuing education unit credit, I would love to send you an email that says that you are here to watch a 1-hour webinar category CEU. That's continuing education unit. The way that you would earn that email is you must follow these instructions. Go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, put your name, your email address. In the subject line, please put September 2024 Security Plus. And in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, SLEAV. Really two code words this month, SLEAV. Then you can put anything else in that message you would like. I do read through every single one of these that you send. I'm not always able to reply back because I do get hundreds of these in a month, but I do look through and read through every single one of them. In about a week, I'm able to send back your continuing education unit email. Again, the way that you would earn that email is to go to the top or the bottom of the Professor Messer website, click the Contact Us link. In that Contact Us link, put your name, your email address, and the subject line, please put September 2024 Security Plus. And in the body of the message on a line by itself, put the super secret code words of the month, SLE and AV. Those are the two I would like you to put. So that is something that I will send you an email. It has a digital signature associated with it, so you can confirm it really did come from me and you know that nothing changed in that message, and that will give you a 1-hour webinar category CEU. I think we have time. Let's squeeze in one more question. I think we can do that, right? Let's get this next question in. This should be one. We'll see how well we know this one. If this one was a gimme, or at least 58% of you, we'll see how you do with this one that asks, which of the following is responsible for allowing, monitoring, and terminating connections? Is this a policy enforcement point, a policy engine, a control plane, a policy administrator, or an operational control? Got a few options there. Which of the following is responsible for allowing, monitoring, and terminating connections? Is this a policy enforcement point, policy engine, control plane, policy administrator, or operational control? If you think you know the answer, please note answers in the chat room. You want to go to professormesser.com/QA and lock in your answer. That's the link that's on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. It's a great way to find the answer, or at least plug in the answer. We're going to find out what the answer is right after you put that in. We're going to see what you think the answer is for these. We'll have to break down all of these different options and what's available in these links. These are important terms, and they're these are new terms on the 701. So if you were studying for the 601, you probably don't recall this topic. This is something that was added in the 701, if I recall properly. Pretty important to know this one. Let's see how you did. As you're plugging in the answers on this one, let's see how you did. The question asks, which of the following is responsible for allowing, monitoring, and terminating connections? Is this a policy enforcement point, a policy engine, a control plane, a policy administrator, or an operational control. Let's see how you chose this particular link. We will close our poll and let's see what you chose. We're all over the place. This is pretty much what we expected, isn't it? Based on the information we saw in the chat, 28% of you say policy enforcement point, 26% of you say control plane, 16% say policy administrator, 16% also say operational control, and 11% say policy engine. Double digits all the way through. No single digits for this one. Well, the thing that we are looking for, the thing that is the important consideration here, is a topic called zero trust. This is a topic that describes a way to monitor and allow access all the time inside of your network and being able to use this. So if you are someone who is looking at a policy enforcement point, it means that you are probably using a system. You're on what is going to naturally be an untrusted network because this is a zero trust network. You have to go through this policy enforcement point, which will then give you access to this trusted enterprise resource. So this is effectively the gatekeeper into all of this. But of course, there has to be something there that can either be that gatekeeper, that can either be the one who says you are allowed into the network or you are not allowed into the network. So you have a couple of different options there to go through. The policy enforcement point is the thing that allows, monitors, and terminates those connections. If we want to get a bigger picture of the entire zero trust model, this is what the architecture looks like. Behind the scenes, this policy enforcement point is not making the ultimate decision. It's simply going through and making sure that the decision is followed. You can think of your policy enforcement point as the police officer. They are the law enforcement. They don't make the laws, they just enforce the laws. Well, then who's making the laws? Who's deciding who gets to go and who gets to stay? That all happens here at the policy decision point, the PDP. There is a policy administrator that talks back and forth to the policy enforcement point, and a policy engine that is often used to be able to make the ultimate decision on who is allowed and who is not allowed. So if we were trying to have something make that, once the decision is made, where's the device that allows, disallows, terminates, monitors, and effectively keeps track of who's able to go where inside of your network? That is indeed your policy enforcement point. And if we look at the answers we received, policy enforcement point did by 2% win out from any of the other options. That was the plurality of you chose a policy enforcement point. And that would be the correct answer. That's exactly what we were looking for. A control plane is a description of the process used to manage a system that is a combination of a control plane and a data plane. So this is a great way if you're ever trying to take a piece of hardware and turn it into a software-based network system. That's a great way to break up that system into its logical pieces. Control plane is not, in this particular case, the thing responsible for allowing, monitoring, and terminating connections. In fact, the control plane doesn't do any of those things. I guess all of that would really happen in a data plane if you were to look at that type of software deployment. So 26% of you chose control plane would not be the correct answer in this case. Policy administrator and policy engine, we've already seen in our images earlier in the architecture that is not what makes those ultimate policy allows or disallows. So those would not be the right answer. And an operational control is part of our security control group. That's in section 1 of your exam objectives. So it would not be the answer we were looking for. The one we wanted was a policy enforcement point, and 28% of you got that one absolutely correct. Well done. Well, I know we're sort of at the top of the hour, but I wanted to squeeze in one more question. This question, though, is going to be a little bit different because it's one that comes directly from my practice exams book. This is a book I wrote because for someone who is trying to find high quality questions on the internet, it can be very difficult there are not a lot of great questions out there. You'll find a lot of outdated questions. You'll find a lot of questions that have nothing to do with the exam. You'll find a lot of questions that are poorly written with bad grammar. It's very frustrating. And you'll find a lot of questions that ultimately are just wrong. They give you the wrong answer for the wrong reasons. I have a feeling a lot of people writing some of these questions have never worked in the world of security, and that's the feeling I get once I start looking through there. So I thought, well, what we need are questions that better represent the actual exam. So I wrote some. I wrote an entire book of 3 separate practice exams that have the same tone, the same style, the same feel as an actual exam, so that you can get an idea of the cadence and the style of the writing on the actual exam. But these are all questions that I have written. They are not questions that you'll find on the exam. That would not be ethical. So I wanted to give you, though, questions that were a high quality, that gave you a preparation. So you weren't just checking yourself that you know the exam objectives, you were also learning a little bit more about what you're facing when you walk into the exam room. So I have for you a question from my practice exams book. This is Practice Exams A. This is on page 9. This is question A20. And as always, please no answers in the chat room. This question asks, 2 companies have been working together for a number of months, and they would now like to qualify their partnership with a broad formal agreement between both organizations. Which of the following would describe this agreement? Would this be SLA, SOW, MOA, or NDA? It's another one with all the acronyms, right? And being able to work through it. This, of course, is a PDF. So if you see certain things in the question that you'd like to highlight, maybe there's certain answers that you would like to decide that you would like to choose, you have the option to modify right on the screen. Maybe you have a stylus you wanted to write things. You can always do that because it's a PDF and it's available for you to work with. This is like you have a book in front of you. Also on this list, you will also find that there are 2 things written on the side. One says quick answer, and one says the details. Now, both of these are going to give you a feel for different options that are available on this exam. So this is a great place to go if you are trying to figure out where do you go to get either just A, B, C, or D, you go the quick answers, or if you just wanted the details of what's here, you wanted a summary, overall summary, these are links. So even though I'm on page 9, this is on page 58 is the details. I don't want you to have to scroll. So this is a hot link. I can click on the 58 and it will take you to page 58. And this is all, by the way, just so you can see it in the book, this is also one that has both a physical version and a digital version here. So I wanted to mention that. So let's, of course, go back to the details, page 58. We'll click on the 58. It moves me to page 58, where you have the question that was waiting for there earlier. 2 companies have been working together. They would like to qualify their partnership, broad formal agreement. Is it SLA, SOW, MOA, or NDA? And it tells you the answer is C, MOA. So you can see that I have an explanation that tells you why that is the right answer. That becomes really useful when you're trying to qualify that, yes, I did get that question right, and it's the reason I chose that answer. I did get it right, and I chose it for the right reason. Now, part of the problem I have is if I get a question wrong, a lot of the stuff you find online doesn't tell you why you got it wrong. But in my mind, if you get a question wrong, it's a perfect opportunity to learn a little bit more about the topic and to learn why you got the question wrong. So in my book, every single wrong or incorrect answer is listed with an explanation of why it is an incorrect answer. So you can see this. Why was SLA not the correct answer? I explain it in the book. Why is SOW, statement of work, not the right answer? I explain why. Why was NDA not the right answer? I explain why that's not the right answer. So I closed the circle there. So if you got it wrong, you can now look and understand why you got the answer wrong. And next time you see that particular topic, you'll know more about it. Another thing I'll mention to you is that these answers that are in here, even if you got the question right, I highly recommend you read through the wrong answers because those topics are from the exam objectives and the questions on your exam might be about an SLA or an SOW or an NDA, and this might be an opportunity for you to learn a little bit more. Now, if you've read the question and you have no idea what the question's even talking about, I include a link to the video where the question came from so you can learn more about the topic. You can either use your camera and use the QR code, or the links are built right into the book and will take you to the website where you can watch the video right there on your mobile device, your laptop, your desktop, or anywhere else. This is my set of practice exams. Once you're done here, this is a PDF, but most PDF readers have a back button. So right here at the top, I'll click the back button and it takes me back to where I started. And now I can go to the next question on my list. So you don't have to spend your time scrolling through a book. You can simply click the links, click the back button, go to the next one. It's all built into my practice exams. And like the other course notes that you have, there are also physical editions of the practice exams available. They, of course, are identical to the digital versions, but they're in a format that you can pick up and take along with you. And of course, you can get the practice exams and the course notes together. And when you buy them together, there's a little bit of a discount that you can get there. So any opportunity to save a little money might be something useful. Find out more about this over on my practice exams. Let's see if we can give you the link. There it is. ProfessorMesser.com/securitype, or simply use the links at the top of the Professor Messer website. You have options for either of those. And of course, I offer upgrade options for that too. So we need to make sure we make those available to you on the website as you're working through those different options on the practice exams. Well, one of the things you will notice as we go through this set of options and the different questions that we do today and all of the different topics we covered is all of these came directly from the CompTIA exam objectives. The objectives are available for you to get for free from the CompTIA website. I have a copy of the objectives available right here. So it's available to download right now, today, from the CompTIA website. You can go to ProfessorMesser.com/objectives or go to your favorite search engine and go to CompTIA exam objectives. And they list out for you everything you need to know on this exam. Everything you need to know before you walk into the exam room is all listed here. Everything about these 4 domains are general security concepts. We have threats, vulnerabilities, and mitigations. You've got security architecture, security operations, and security program management and oversight. They are all in there. So it's a free document. It's a fantastic checklist. And if you're somebody who's trying to make that determination on if you're ready or not ready to take the exam, that checklist will be exactly what you're looking for and be able to maybe even highlight places you may want to do some additional studies before you walk into your exam. You can grab these, of course, at ProfessorMesser.com/objectives, and the link will take you over to the CompTIA website. We do one of these study groups every month. This next study group that we've scheduled is for October the 23rd, assuming there's not another hurricane coming through. But these dates can change. So if that does happen, you will see it updated immediately at ProfessorMesser.com/calendar. I also have a number of options on the Discord. There's an events channel. I also update the events channel as well. So you can certainly find that at ProfessorMesser.com/calendar or at the ProfessorMesser.com/Discord. And the next Security Plus study group is October 23rd. We actually have an A Plus study group on October the 8th and October the 10th, and a Network Plus study group on October the 16th. We'd love for you to come back and watch one of those as well. Well, although we're done with the first hour of Q&A, we're not done yet today. I've been asking you questions for this hour. How about you ask me some questions? That's what we do on our after show. Stick around for that. That's coming up immediately after this. Don't touch a thing. We'll be able to bring this to you in our after show. Of course, we have our Twitter or X links for our weekly pop quiz question, along with the links on Instagram. And if you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel, you'll want to do that right away. Go to ProfessorMesser.com/YouTube. Also, remember, you've got our discounted vouchers on our website if you happen to be in the U.S., Canada, or U.S. territories at ProfessorMesser.com/vouchers. And our course notes, practice exams, and more is available on our website as well. Make sure you check those out at ProfessorMesser.com/701SB. Well, that brings us to the end of the first hour of the study group. Stick around for the after show. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you next time on the Security Plus study group. Okay. Let's take a sip. Let's switch around. There's not much to switch around the room, but I'll switch around my software so that you can now ask some questions. So if you are at professormesser.com/QA, that's the link that you see on your screen, you'll now see something else that's there. It asks that you can submit questions for the second hour of the study group at any time. You may have even submitted one already. We will be moderating questions during the session, so your contribution will not appear immediately. Not just may, it won't. I'll just tell you straight up, because we'll have them all behind the scenes. So I get to sift through these and figure out what questions you might have. So if you have a question about certifications, about technology, about something in the news, about something unrelated to any of this, you're certainly welcome to ask those questions. Simply go to the link on your screen, go to professormesser.com/QA, and you could submit your question for these. Lots of questions there. This is the best way to ask and get those in this view. So let's start, since we talked about CEUs earlier, let's talk about CEUs now. This is a question from Anthony. He asks, passed my 601 in late June. Congratulations on your Security Plus. I am currently studying for the Intent 009. Would it be possible to get CEUs from both of your study groups? Well, you certainly could. One of the things that we do with each of our study groups is I offer an opportunity for you to submit and earn a continuing education unit credit. But would it apply if you are watching Network Plus? Or would it apply if you're watching Security Plus? Well, these are good questions. So I will tell you, as I am bringing up the CompTIA website on my side, I'm going to bring up the continuing education part that deals specifically with CEUs. The CEUs that we provide to you, or first, before we even get to the CEU part, you only need to renew the highest level certification from CompTIA. So if you have an A+, a Network Plus, and a Security Plus, you only have to renew one of those, and it's the one that is the highest ranking. CompTIA has a list of these rankings on their website, so you know which one is the highest. So if you have all three of those, for example, you only have to renew Security Plus, and when you renew Security Plus, everything below that is automatically renewed as well. So this is great. If you have A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus, you don't have to renew A+, and then go renew Network Plus, and then go renew Security Plus. That would take forever. Fortunately, you don't have to do that at all. You just have to renew one of them. In that particular case, you would have to renew the Security Plus exam. Now, the question is, what CEUs would apply then? Can you watch a Network Plus study group and use those towards a Security Plus certification renewal? For that, we go to the CompTIA website. This is the CompTIA website on this is Earn Continuing Education Units. And on here, it says how to earn CEUs. And it even says relevance. And it says at least 50% of the course content, and it's referring to this live stream, at least 50% of this live stream must relate to one or more of the exam objectives for the certification that you're renewing. So this is pretty broad when you start thinking about it. Let's say you have your Network Plus certification. You haven't earned your Security Plus yet, but you're watching this live stream and I've sent you a CEU. Could you use a live stream CEU from Security Plus to help you renew your Network Plus? Well, as you're certainly aware, on the Network Plus exam, there's an entire section on security. There's a big chunk, a whole domain on security associated with the Network Plus. And because what we did today, at least 50% of what we did today is related to security, and security is one of those exam objectives, then it would apply towards the Network Plus. So I'm glad they made this broad so that you could effectively take any topic from that exam you're trying to renew. And as long as that topic is covered in the live stream, you're good to go. So very useful to know that, especially if you're planning to renew your certification. And if you are planning to work on your certification renewal, that's an important thing to keep in mind, because you don't want to have to do more work than you need just to renew. In reality, I think most people are using the CertMaster CE to renew these days, which means you don't have to collect CEUs, but a number of you still like to collect CEUs, and there might be a good reason to do so. So that is an option I will provide to you. But for those of you watching live and for those of you watching on a replay, you must follow that process that I mentioned in the first hour to be able to earn your CEU. So you have to get an email from me, and I digitally sign the email so that you have some verification that it's something I really wrote for you. So that if you're ever audited by CompTIA, they do this occasionally, they'll ask, well, show us where you got all these CEUs from, and you'll have that information that's there. If you didn't catch the code for the CEU and what we were doing, you'll have to go back to the first hour today and start sifting through those to figure out the details. We won't be able to provide those in the chat room, and we won't provide them now. You have to be watching the first hour to be able to earn that CEU. It's part of the deal. And you have to follow the instructions. You can't just randomly message me with information for a CEU. There's a formal process, which is part of me knowing that you must have watched this because you knew what the process happened to be. See how that works together? It's really, really an important part of the CEU qualification. That makes me know that you must have seen it, or at least got close, at least that section of the video you saw. Hopefully you saw more than that. Let's get some more questions that you have. For those that are out, you can submit these at any time with the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Use the link at the top of the screen to submit your question at any time. Some of you are asking about, oh, you took the 601 exam and you like the practice exam book. I guess we already answered your question. Do we plan to do one for the new Network Plus exam? We have one for the new Security Plus. We need to do one for Network Plus. I have mentioned in the past that I want to have a Network Plus practice exam. And I think it's something that we want to make available yet, but we don't have anything to announce yet. So keep an ear out, keep an eye out for these. And when that's available, if it's available, it will be available on my website. So you'll know exactly when it will appear magically. You'll know that it's available on the site. I don't tend to give any feedback or any announcements of things until they really are available. I'm very particular about that. I'm not one for hyping something or announcing something and then it not ever showing up. I hate those situations. So instead of having that happen, we make sure that we have it in our hand, that's something we can show you, and that's when we'll tell you it's ready, is when we actually have it. And ultimately, that's all you would ultimately care about either. It's no good knowing something's coming. It needs to be there. So we're working on those. We're getting to that point. I think it would be very valuable to have a Network Plus practice exams book. I'll put it that way. And that's how I make my decisions anyway. More questions. Let's keep going through the questions you have here. So other things that are in this list, a lot of you sending in some great questions, by the way. So a lot of these we've already answered, so I'm sort of flipping through because we sort of mentioned that earlier in having this. The questions, a lot of you are asking questions about the Security Plus course, or perhaps the practice exams, or the course notes, and you're asking, hey, is this enough for me to pass the exam? Which is a perfectly reasonable question. I would think, for the most part, as somebody who's taken a lot of industry certification exams, I've probably sat for at least 25 certification exams in my career, probably more than that if you extend it out a little bit, but going to Pearson VUE, to a facility, sitting down and taking an exam, probably over 25 of those. And one of the things that was true in every case was that I wanted to find as many different resources as I could to study from. I don't think there's any one thing that is enough for anyone. Well, that's not entirely true. If you're already familiar with a lot of these topics, maybe just the videos would be enough. Maybe that would be fine. Or maybe if you are better studying from a video than you are from a book, maybe that would make more sense. I certainly created my video course to cover every single exam topic. So I cover everything that could possibly be asked of you in the exam in the videos. So at least you've got a baseline to start from. But I think having additional study materials, get a book, get some notes. People all the time will tell me, well, I got your course notes, but it seems like these is just a set of notes from your course. Yeah, these are course notes. That's what those are. You still have to know the content. You still need to watch the videos, maybe read a textbook, maybe go through some of the video content that we have, maybe step through the different videos multiple times. We put a lot of work into the video course to make it comprehensive and to cover every topic on the exam. I go through a meticulous indexing process prior to even shooting the first video. So I make sure we cover every single topic. It's very important that the video course be as good, or I would say better, than a video course that you would pay for. That's the goal we have when we create these. This is not just thrown together like here's a YouTube video that's full of just filler. We never want to do that. And I think as you've gone through my video course, you've seen from the instant you start the video, it's content. We don't mess around with a lot of fancy music at the end and explaining to you what the next 5 minutes of your life are going to be like, and then describe what section of. Why would we do that? Just get to the point, go through the content we need to know, and then we're out. I think YouTube sort of lends itself to that when you start working through those. So I would say you could use any single video course, and a lot of people do, to pass their exam. A lot of people, they don't go to the notes. They don't use practice exams. They don't do any labs. They just watch the video course. They go to take the exam and they go and they pass it. I think that is probably not the highest percentage passing. I think there's, in many cases, people who already have some knowledge in the industry. So I would recommend 4 things. It's my recommendations of the 4 study materials that you need. You need a good video course. Maybe I'm biased there, but I think that's a good one to start with. I think a good book can really be helpful if you're someone who likes to read through books. Learning from a book is different than learning from a video. It's a different process. The content in a book is much denser because it's text. Video content presents information in a different way. It's not quite as dense when you're going through it. So books allow you to cram a lot more information into a smaller space, but it's in a different format. I think combining those 2 things together is a good 1-2 punch. Then maybe having some labs to go through can give you some practical experience on setting up a VPN, running some different scenarios for security, being able to see these. We don't have as much hands-on in the 701 as we did with the 601, so that it does not have quite the amount of emphasis as it once did, but it's still an important thing to lock down some of those topics. And then the 4th one is to get good Q&A. And of course, I think our practice exams is the best security plus Q&A you're going to get. We built it that way. So that's a really good example of 4 things that I think would be your best possible resources for studying. It would give you the best possible percentage for passing. And that's what I'm trying to get to you, is to give you every resource you could possibly use to be able to pass that exam the first time you sit down in that exam room. So those are my 4 recommendations. You find those 4 and I think you'll be in good shape. Let's keep going through this list. This is a common question, but an important one. This is from Ben. Ben asks, how would you go about learning all these crazy acronyms that are in the objectives? I'm paraphrasing a bit, Ben. Any tips you can provide? Well, I definitely have tips. I have nothing if not tips and tricks. So let's figure out first about the acronyms, and let me give you my perspective of what I think of the acronyms in this list. So to start this, I'm going to go back to the exam objectives. You're familiar with these. We looked at these earlier. These had a list of all of the different domains, all of the different bullets, and everything that you needed to memorize before you walked into the exam room. Now, that's great to have this information, but in the back of the exam objectives is a list of acronyms. Let's see if we can bring this up into a single screen. It's our SY0-701 acronym list. And it starts with AAA. That stands for Authentication, Authorization, and Accounting. It's right there in the list. Next is ACL, access control list. The next is AES, Advanced Encryption Standard. And so it goes. You have all of these acronyms, and they are well documented in this list, and there's a lot of them. Page 2, page 3, page 4. And it's a lot. It's not just a little bit on page 4. It's most of page 4. So there's a lot of acronyms. Now, my perspective of this is that the acronyms are not as important as what they represent. So let me see if I can give you a perspective of this. For example, we'll just use this one right now. MTTR spelled out means mean time to recover. Now, you will never get a question on your exam that says, what does MTTR stand for? What do the letters MTTR represent? You will never get a question on your exam like this. So if your flashcards show MTTR on one side and mean time to recover on the other side, you're wasting your time. You will never get a question that wants you to know the differences between those two. And in fact, MTTR, mean time to recover, that one kind of spells out what that is to some degree. But some of these others may not. Something like, let's find one in here. OID means object identifier. What is that? What are you talking? What is an object? What is the, huh? It doesn't even explain what it is. The abbreviation is one thing. The name is another, and neither of them together tell you anything about what that is. So it's a good example of how understanding what the technology is and how it is applied is much more important than knowing an abbreviation and a couple of words associated with the abbreviation. That is exactly the depth that CompTIA wants from you, is to understand more than just the name. They want you to understand how that name is used. How is this thing used? OID, object identifier. What is that? What is it associated with? It has a very specific use. I'm not even going to tell you. In the study, that's your homework. You have to now go figure out what that is. And in reality, I guess there is a concept associated with that on the Security Plus course, but I would not really consider that a Security Plus, necessarily a Security Plus topic, unless it is one in the exam objectives. Let's see if we can go through the exam objectives and see where this would apply. It would apply probably in section 4.4. There is a section that describes the Simple Network Management Protocol, or SNMP, and specifically how traps are used in SNMP. Well, SNMP uses a set or a collection of variables or a collection of metrics called a MIB, a Management Information Base. And the description of each MIB is called an object identifier, or an OID. That's where that comes from. So in this case, the Simple Network Management Protocol traps, or SNMP, also has additional context that is applied into those acronyms at the end of the exam objectives. I will tell you, though, for the most part, and I would say for really 100%, I would say all of the acronyms you're going to need to know, you will learn organically as you step through the exam objectives. For example, just in section 4.4, there is the Security Content Automation Protocol, or SCAP. It's listed right there under the tools. There is the Security Information and Event Management, or SIM. There's Data Loss Prevention, or DLP. And there's the Simple Network Management Protocol traps, which of course is referring to SNMP. So in that section, you learned at least 4 acronyms, probably more, because there's things like OID that are associated with this. But those 4 were in this list of exam objectives. You didn't have to go to the back and hunt these down. So I would say initially, you should focus on acronyms that you're learning organically as you go through the exam objectives, and limit your focus just to those acronyms as a starting point. Now, beyond that, if you wanted to learn more about other topics that are covered in the rest of those acronyms, you can always go back to the exam objectives in the back of the list, and you can go through all of the others that are in here. I would say there's a lot in here that you just do not need to know based on the exam objectives, though. Some of these are just very tertiary. They're very much in the outside of the things you need to know. For example, PTZ stands for pan tilt zoom. It's a way to describe a certain technology built into cameras. Cameras, of course, are part of the physical security section on the Security Plus exam. But do you really need to know PTZ for the exam? Really? Probably not. But that's a good example of how not everything in here really has a 100% application to Security Plus exam itself. But most of them do. And you're familiar with a lot of these already because you know OSPF. You probably learned, I don't even know if OSPF even shows up as part of maybe there's a routing section we need to know for this. Things like OAuth we would certainly learn as part of what we're doing in the exam objectives. We already went through SIM. We already went through DLP. So there's things you're just going to learn as you go. And I think that's a very good way to approach these acronyms. There's just so many of them that focus on the important ones first that are covered in the primary set of exam objectives. Then if you really wanted to go learn some of the others, you could. But I don't know that I'd even bother. I don't think I would. I think I'd stick to the ones that are in the objectives. If it's not in the objectives, I think the most important topic you need to know are the exam objectives. So if you don't know all of the exam objectives yet, don't worry about your acronyms. That's the least of your concerns at this point. Stick to the objectives. Learn everything in the exam objectives first and foremost. That's where you should be putting your primary emphasis. That's where you should be directing everything you need to know in the exam objectives. Incredibly important. Make sure you're familiar with that. All right, let's do some more questions. I do have a hard stop at the top of the hour, so I want to get through as many of these as we can. So along these same lines, this is a very popular question I get as well that I just nuked there by hitting the wrong button on my screen. The question was a question asked about being able to find and qualify questions about port numbers on Security Plus. Port number questions. So for this, I go back to the exam objectives. And as my common answer for this is I say that you should memorize every port number listed in the CompTIA exam objectives. So for example, if we start in section 1, there are no port numbers. In fact, you go through all of the sections in domain 1, no port numbers. Well, maybe they're in domain 2. We'll go to domain 2. Threats, vulnerabilities, and mitigations. So let's look for the port numbers in domain 2. There's not any. There's no port numbers in domain 2. Well, okay, domain 3, security architecture. That's where port numbers would be. We should memorize all the port numbers listed. There's none in there. I think you're seeing where I'm going with this. There are no port numbers specifically listed in the Security Plus exam objectives. Exactly 0. And I mention this because people have shown up in our Discord. They've sent me emails and said, here's a document that I received. And this document, there were pages and pages of protocols and port numbers in this document they sent me. And they say, this is what my instructor gave me to study for Security Plus. And my answer, I think rightly, was why? Why did they give you pages and pages and pages of port numbers? There's literally no port numbers in the exam objectives. Now, that doesn't mean that there won't be questions on the exam that talk about different protocols and perhaps different port numbers associated with those protocols. But for this, we'll go to the very top of the exam objectives. And I think it gives you a perspective of this when you look at the recommended experience for Security Plus. It says a minimum of 2 years of experience in IT administration with a focus on security, hands-on experience with technical information security, and a broad knowledge of security topics, security concepts. So this is a really good example where there are topics that could be discussed as part of this Security Plus exam that aren't specifically written in the exam objectives, but they're things you should have known anyway. For example, how do you turn on a computer? Probably important if you're working in a world of security, but they don't have a section of the exam objectives that describes how you turn a computer on. It's a good example of that. Same thing applies to port numbers, and it would probably be port numbers that are just so extremely common that you would already know them. You already know port 80 is HTTP. You already know port 443 is HTTPS. I mean, it's a perfectly good example of port numbers that are very, very common. You already know that 22 is SSH. So those types of port numbers are just things you already know. Maybe there's 5 or 6 of those. That's it. So stick to the top 5, maybe the top 10 most popular port numbers. And even that, I think, is way overextension for the exam. And I say this because if you're going to spend time studying and memorizing things, it should be the exam objectives. It should be this content. CompTIA has already told you we will absolutely ask you a question coming from any one of these topics. And we stick to this list when we give you the exam. CompTIA very rarely, if ever, goes outside the scope of this list as part of these questions that you will be graded on for your exam. So that's why I tell you, don't worry so much about topics that aren't covered in here. Why are you going out and studying something they didn't tell you to study? Why aren't you studying these things? Because even if they were to ask you a question about port numbers on your exam, they're going to ask you a lot more questions about these things. And your point in the objective on these certification exams is to pass the exam. I would love it, and we should always have a goal of getting 100% of the questions right. But that is a relatively unusual result from an industry certification exam. Stick to the objectives. Focus on the objectives. And if you do that, you will be able to pass your exam. That's how important these objectives are. So I would tell you, don't worry so much about ports and protocols. Don't worry about memorizing all of these. Why are you spending your time on that? People will spend days memorizing ports and protocols. You could have spent days memorizing things that might actually be asked of you on the exam. They're clearly listed in the exam objectives. After you've memorized everything in the exam objectives, I give you permission to start memorizing port numbers, if that helps. So that's why I don't think deviating from the exam objectives for any topic is a good use of your time. I think the best use of your time is sticking to the objectives. And if your goal is to pass this exam, that's the place where you should put your primary effort is into those exam objectives. That's how close CompTIA sticks to those. So that's my recommendation to you, my tip and trick. Those are the tips and tricks. Stick to the objectives, and I think you'll be fine. In fact, you will be fine. If you know everything in the exam objectives, you're passing your exam. Bottom line, that's how close they stay to those. Let's keep going through this list of questions you are sending me. As the clock is ticking, as the hurricane gets closer, we'll have to see what the next step is here. Next questions that you have submitted. And of course, you can submit them anytime by following the link on your screen. Go to professormesser.com/QA. Other questions. In here, we have, there are a number of questions you folks are sending in. A lot of we've already answered, though. So I'm sort of skipping over a number of these. So I apologize as I'm reading through that there are in these. Another acronym question, for example. So we'll just keep moving through this list. I'm not exactly sure the context of this one. But I think this is one. Well, this is really more of a Network Plus question, and it's a pretty good one because it's a topic that comes up regardless of what exam series you happen to be taking. As many of you know from earlier in the year, there was a transition period from November of last year until June of this year, or is it July, where you could either take the 601 version of Security Plus or the 701 exam for Security Plus. You decide, you take whichever one you want, and then if you pass that exam, you're Security Plus certified. And there's always a transition period. There's always an overlap period where you can choose which one that you would like to be able to take. We're currently in one of those transition periods for Network Plus. So the Network Plus exam was updated earlier this year. And on December the 20th of this year, the older Network Plus exam will be retired. And there will obviously only be one Network Plus exam left. So this question asks, I've been studying for the 008, that would be the previous or older version of the Network Plus exam. Been studying for that since July, but it seems due to conditions, I can't take the exam before December. Well, that certainly gets you right into that deadline of December 20th, that retirement date. So the question is, what would you advise I switch to the 009, and what part should I focus on since I finished studying for the 008? Well, if you finish studying for the 008, then I would recommend you take the 008 exam. Now, you mentioned you can't take the exam before December, but you can take it up until December the 20th. If you can get in there and take that exam before then, that's what I would recommend, because the exam objectives for the 008 and the exam objectives for the 009, although very similar, there are differences between those two. And the differences between those two exams are not insurmountable. It's about a 20% difference in those two, depending on how you calculate it, 20 to 30%. But it is different. So if you were to decide, I can't take the 008, I have to go take the 009, I would really redirect you into the 009 videos, the 009 course notes. All of your study materials should be for the 009. Let me bring up some information that might explain why I say that. So let's go to my 009 content, and I have an image, a chart that demonstrates the differences between the 008 exam and the 009 exam. So let's bring up this comparison view. The comparison is one that is one chart, one side, one of these circles is for the N10 008, the other is for the N10 009. So you'll notice the N10 009 circle a little bit smaller than the 008. If you were to go to the exam objectives and count all of the objectives, a very broad counting that I did for the 008 is that the 008 had 590 objectives. The 009 has 430. And so these are to scale. So that is the difference. This is a 430 objective circle. This is a 590. So to some degree, the 009 doesn't have quite as many topics you have to memorize. That's not entirely true, but it does tell a story. Notice that the number of objectives shared between the 008 and 009 is about 67% of the 009. So about 2/3 of the 009 are topics that are already covered in the 008. That means 1/3 of the 009 are topics that you have not studied yet. And 1/3 of the exam is a lot of the exam. That's a big part of the exam. So you would never want to study 008 topics and then go walk into the 009 exam. You're already at a huge disadvantage because you didn't study a big chunk of that exam. And a 66 on an exam does not sound like passing to me. So that's a significant problem. That's why I always tell people, make sure you study from the study materials that your exam matches with. It's an important part of this. I'll also say, notice that the 008, look at all the topics that don't even appear in the 009. Half of the exam. Approximately 50% of the 008 topics don't even show up on the 009. That's a lot. So I would hate for you to lose all of that. I would hate for you to lose all of that training that you went through, all of the things you've read, all the videos you've watched, all the work you went into memorizing all of these objectives, it would be good to take the 008 exam so that you're able to use some of that knowledge that you've accumulated. But if this is a situation where you're just not going to be able to fit it in, you just do not have a way to take that exam, you're going to need to maybe focus on a new set of exam study materials that are specific to the 009s. There may be a little bit of a restart for you. There's obviously 2/3 of the exam are the same. So this may not be as bad as you think. You may be able to very quickly go through a set of videos to refresh yourself and then learn the new topics. And you can always compare both sets of exam objectives to see what's new and what's different. So that maybe that will help you make a decision with those as well. You've got some different options and things to consider. And I think maybe looking through the objectives will give you a little more perspective as to what would be good to do, what would not be good to do. So along those same lines, this is a question from Anonymous who asks, hey, should I keep studying for my 601 or should I shift and start focusing on the 701? Currently, I'm in section 3.4. Well, one of the things that you will find on the 601 exam, for those of you that are in an English-speaking country, the 601 exam is one that was released on November the 12th of 2020, and it retired on July 31st. So you can't take the 601 exam anymore if you are in an English-speaking country. Now, if you're not in an English-speaking country, you're going to need to take the exam in that language, because the English language version of the Security Plus exam was retired on July the 31st of this year. So you don't have a choice. You have to study for the 701. I would highly recommend that you shift gears over to the 701. And just as I did a comparison for the Network Plus, oh, you're going to love the one that I did for Security Plus. Hold on to your hat for this one. Let's bring up the comparison for these two, if I can find it. There it is, my comparison. I put it in a different place. So for the 601 and 701, a similar chart. But notice the 601 and 701, indeed, it looks like they downsized again, and they did. There are over 1,000 objectives on the 601. It's a big exam. On the 701, shrunk down to 662. Notice that about 50% of the 701 objectives are covered on the 601, but 70% of this exam, because it's just so huge, doesn't even appear on the 701. So if you're studying from the 601, all this yellow part is stuff that you're studying for no good reason, because it never appears on the 701 exam. That's a big one, isn't it? That's a huge difference between those two. And notice about half of the 701 content is also brand new, much more than the 33% you saw with Network Plus. Half of the 701 is brand new. So if you studied for the 601 study materials and you walked into the 701 exam, the best score you could hope to get, without just guessing, is 50%. Not a passing score, by the way. So that's why I tell you, make sure you study from the right exam materials. Make sure they match the version of the exam that you plan to take. And that's why. Because there are, in many cases, significant differences between one exam and the other. And if you speak English or you're taking this in an English-speaking country and you need to study for the 701, throw all your 601 stuff out. Don't use it. Don't refer to it. It's not useful to you. Everything needs to be 701 content because it's such a big difference between those two. More questions. Let's keep going through this list. This is more of a question, kind of a broader industry question, but we can kind of speak to it. This is also from Anonymous, who says, have you seen any trends in remote versus in office? Do you think remote work has considerably diminished and will return to pre-pandemic levels? Remote work is not something that showed up during the pandemic. There were people I worked with 20 years ago in this industry who worked from home. It usually was folks that were in very large organizations that had a very specific skill set. They might have been tier 3, tier 4, or have a specialization in troubleshooting. And they covered an area of the world that they did not physically live in or would be difficult to get to for troubleshooting. So very often this was a big carrier. So maybe AT&T, Verizon, Sprint, those big companies have these large, enormously large data centers and wide area network infrastructures. And they often have to do troubleshooting. But there's people all over the world who are involved in these troubleshooting processes, especially when you're got a company in North America who is communicating to a remote office in Germany through many different wide area network connections and many different local exchange carriers and many different medias to get there. You can have problems every step along the way. And in some cases, these problems can be very complex. It might be routing, it might be firmware, it might be MTU, it might be routing, could be tons of different things causing problems. So those people were able to work from home because most of the time they were sitting on a conference call with a bunch of other technicians trying to solve these problems. And that's all they did all day, every day. They'd come in at 8, they'd work on troubleshooting these things. At 5, they would be done. They'd hand it off to the next group and they would continue with the troubleshooting process. So this remote idea of us all working remotely is not something unheard of. Now, obviously, during the pandemic, we all worked remotely. Everybody stayed at home. Well, obviously, that's not sustainable. We need to be able to, in many cases, work with other people in more of a collaborative form. And being physically disconnected from people diminishes your ability to do that. There's a physics problem there. It's so easy for me to look around the corner and go, hey, I got a question about this thing that we're doing with that remote site. If you have a second, you can look at my screen. Or what do you think that was? Or let's talk about it. And you can kind of ad hoc all get together right there in the same place and kind of talk through the problem. Many organizations that do development find that getting all of the developers together into the same physical area helps create a more cohesive product. So there are reasons for having everyone work in the same workplace. And there's good reasons for doing things like that. Some jobs, you can't help it. If you're in shipping and receiving, there's a physical product that has to be shipped out. You can't do that from home. You have to be there and be able to work through it. So that's why I tell people all the time that working from an office or working in a place where there are other people like you doing a similar thing, there is an advantage to that. And companies know that there's an advantage to that, and they want to put that together to be able to use it. But one of the trends that we've started to see, though, is companies have very aggressively now, because it's been a while, they want people back in the office. And there might be other reasons beyond collaboration, and there probably certainly is. For example, many organizations have multi-year leases. They have buildings that they are still paying for another 10 years or more. They want to fill up those buildings with people and get their money's worth out of that building. And having people there is that a good or bad reason to have people come back to the office? That's a fine argument. We can argue about whether that's good or bad just because of doing something like that. But one of the things you noticed over the past week is that Amazon came back and said, no longer going to be doing this remote work thing. Everybody has to be in the office 5 days a week, because they've seen there's value in having people immediately accessible to each other. They feel that it is an advantage competitively within their organization to do that. So I think that's a really good example of how companies have changed their approach to this. They want people back in the office. And it's becoming a more unusual and rarer case to find remote work. It certainly was unusual before. We're going back to that unusual circumstance for remote work and remote access. So that's why I tell people don't rely, especially entry-level jobs, help desk positions, tier 1 and tier 2. You're probably not going to be remote. You're probably going to be in a workplace for that. And then once you get to a point in your industry where you have a niche knowledge, or you have a set of skills that are very unique, well, now you've got more leverage. Now you've got the ability to say, well, I'd like to work remotely. Okay, we can manage that, and being able to work through it. So you've got some options when you start having more knowledge, when you start having more leverage, really, is you have more of that. But those having help desk now be remote, it's becoming more of a thing of the past. I think we're starting to see that companies are getting much more aggressive about having people come back into the office to do that, for better or worse. That's just the situation we happen to find ourselves in. And like anything else, you get to decide whether that's what you want to do in the future. My previous positions were one where I was always traveling. I was always out in the field. So I always had to visit people and go see them at their office. I really didn't have a choice. I did not work from home. If I was at home, it was really an unusual situation. I was always in an airport. I was always in a hotel. I was always somewhere else doing what I was doing. I kind of like not doing that. I kind of like being in one place now. So I'm always in the office. I'm always here. My office, though, is at home. So you've got different options depending on the jobs. You got different options depending on your skill set. And if remote work is something you want to do, you should find what jobs are out there today that are allowing remote work, and maybe think about doing that as what you want to do in the future. And maybe you use that as a longer term strategy for, I want to work into a level 3 position. I want to work into a knowledge of this topic that would allow me to work from home. So you have some of those. You have some of those ideas that you might want to think about as you are planning your strategy for the future, because that might be important to you. I know we're at the top of the hour. I think we can fit in one other question. I know I had a hard stop, probably not as hard as we were thinking, because I've got a little bit of leverage here. And since we're sort of on this roll, I want to go through this list. Some folks very quickly were asking about performance-based question practice. I mentioned my practice exams book earlier, and one of the things we didn't talk about in this practice exams book is I do have performance-based questions in the practice exam book itself. There are 5 performance-based questions in each of these exams. There are 3 exams. Therefore, there are 15 performance-based questions in this practice exams book. So and of course, we do a new performance-based question at the beginning of every study group. So you might want to go back through the study group replays. That may be another good place you can go to get performance-based questions, or at least an idea of what a performance-based question would look like. You got other ideas. Again, I think the best approach to performance-based questions is knowing the exam objectives, because ultimately, if you know the exam objectives, if you know the content, it really doesn't matter how somebody asks the question, you will be able to answer it. Doesn't matter what it happens to be. Let's keep going very quickly into one more of these. I think I've answered the question about, am I ready? How would we really prepare for the exam? The exam objectives. That's your checklist. Always go back to the exam objectives. This really is the best way to prep, because you can go through this and use it as a huge checklist. Compare and contrast various types of security controls. What is a technical category of security control? What is a managerial category? What is an operational category? What is a physical category? Can you answer those? Check, 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 check. The control types. What is a preventive control type? What is a deterrent? What is a detective? What is a corrective? What is compensating? And what is directive? So there are topics there. You should be able to check off each one of those. If you can't, you need to circle it. You need to study. That's something you need to make sure you know before you schedule your exam. Now let's go to section 1.2 and do exactly the same thing. Now let's go to section 1.3 and do exactly the same thing. So we will keep doing this over and over and over until we learn everything listed in the exam objectives. That's your best way to know if you are ready to take your exam, because these exams are expensive. They absolutely are. And I want you to walk into that room being solid, knowing, being very secure in the knowledge you have about this Security Plus exam, knowing exactly what's going to be expected of you. And when you start reading through these questions, oh, I know what that is. I know what that is. I know what that is. The familiarity with these topics can be extremely powerful. It can make you really understand these topics. You jump into the exam and you're going through the exam like it's nothing. That's how important those objectives are for this. And I think a good place to maybe end up today is, although this is one not very timely if you're watching this on the replay, have you been prepping for the hurricane? For those of you not familiar, we are based out of Florida. So there is a hurricane that it's a big hurricane that's probably going to affect most of Florida. So I would say if you're someone who is kind of focusing on being safe during this time frame, let's go to the National Hurricane Center, and I'll give you an idea of where this happens to be. I think I have the view up. I have such a bad perspective of this. Let's go to spaghetti models. One of the things that I do is I don't use my normal browser on a live stream. So all the links I normally have are not available to me, but I do have the link to NOAA. And so this is where the hurricane is currently, just off of Cuba and the Yucatan Peninsula, and it's heading right up through Florida, but it's a big storm. It's really big. So as this is moving up through Florida, it's basically the size of Florida. So we're all going to get some kind of rain. We're all going to get some kind of wind. If you're in Florida, if you know anyone in Florida, if you are anywhere close to Florida, you're probably going to be impacted at some level from this particular storm. All I would say is for those of you that are in this area, or if you know someone in this area, do everything you can to stay safe. Do everything you can to follow the information that's coming from your local authorities. If they tell you that you're in an area that needs to get out of that area, you should absolutely get out. This is going through a part of Florida that was hit recently in the last number of years. Most of the people in that area know how bad it got on these storms that came through in previous years. So I don't think there's going to be a lot of people being lackadaisical or less concerned. I think everybody's pretty laser focused on staying safe in the state of Florida, as we are. Now, fortunately, we're more in the central part of Florida. We're sort of far away from the worst winds, but we will be getting winds. We will be getting rain. But we've done all that we need to do here to stay safe. We have our supplies. We have our battery backups. We have everything, hopefully, that we will need to get through this. Ours will be relatively, for this particular storm, we're going to be relatively safe. I have family in the Panhandle. They will be arriving at my house today. So I've managed to get them to get out of their home, and they're going to come hang out with us for the next couple days. That way I know they're going to be safe regardless of what happens when this thing hits as a Category 3 in the northern part of Florida. So if you're up there, make sure you stay safe. For those of you that have never been to Florida during a storm, you don't want to be here. This is not the time to visit. So we hope you come back to Florida once the hurricane comes by. We'd love to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us today. This study group has always been a lot of fun. We always love doing our Security Plus study groups, Network Plus study groups, A Plus study groups. Gives us a great opportunity to hang out with you, to learn more about the questions that you have, and hopefully maybe some of the questions that we asked today will help you with your studies for the Security Plus exam. Plus, these are always a lot of fun to do. And I want to thank you for joining us and hanging out with me for a couple of hours. Thank you so much also for your support. As a reminder, you can always go to the Professor Messer website, learn more about our practice exams and our course notes. They are out there, something that might help you for your studies. And of course, it always helps support what we are doing here. If you'd like to also support us in other ways, if you like this video, we'd love for you to give it a thumbs up. We'd also love it if you would subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just click the YouTube link at the bottom of this. Go to our YouTube channel and subscribe there. It's another great way to help, and it doesn't cost you anything, which is also good too. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope to see you after the storm. Come on back next month for our A+, Network Plus, and Security Plus study groups. Thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time on the Security Plus study group. Thanks, everybody.